I have not.
Okay, well. 5. Got a quorum anyway. 5 out of 6, so that's good.
So we still have one position open, correct?
Yes. And I have a prospect who's going to apply.
You're muted.
And then we still need counts. Is Counselor Baumgartner joining us tonight?
I haven't heard.
She should be.
Okay, good.
Okay, just so you know, everything's working.
Great.
Did you
Now
send
you
a text
go-
from Mike asking if a citizen could join us and do a public comment also?
What's that?
I saw I mentioned earlier somebody that wanted to comment about wanting to have curbside composting. I see on the agenda there's 5 minutes slated for public comment. I invited her to join. I don't know if she will be.
There's Mary.
Are you talking Emily?
No, it was somebody else in that Facebook group that Emily manages. I believe her name is Heidi.
Okay. Because I checked with Emily because she had mentioned wanting to speak on it, but she's not able to join tonight.
Okay, well. Not having Charlie here, looks like we've got definitely a quorum, so we should probably start.
Okay, well, if we got everything working, so Jerry, you're good to go?
Kathy, are we good to go? You're,
Yep.
okay.
Okay, great. Well, then we've got quorum, we've got Counselor Baumgartner, we've got Jerry, and we have all of our SAB friends, and we have quorum. So it is 6:04 p.m. and the SAB meeting is called to order. And if we can go around real quick and just state who we are for this recording. I'm Kim Bria, co-chair of the SAB. And you just popcorn it.
Hi, I'm Mike Carlson, board member of the SAB, and for my first meeting.
Hi, I'm Victoria, board member. Here for umpteenth meeting, and Mike, nice to see you out of the boat.
Yeah, good to see you again.
So Greg Smith, new member of the SAB, but good to see you old timers.
Terry Shoemaker, co-chair, SAB, good to see all y'all.
Mary Baumgartner, council liaison.
Jerry Gabrielato, city manager.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brenna Cruz. I am the city's new emergency management coordinator.
Welcome. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Hope to not have any emergencies tonight.
We'll try not to give you a very long list tonight, Brenna. Since you're new. Oh, and Jerry, you didn't, I don't think Jerry piped in.
Yes, you did.
Oh,
He's
did you?
muted.
Yeah.
He's muted. He's good.
Okay. All right. Did everyone get a chance to read the minutes from last month's meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any revisions or corrections? Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from last month?
Hope to approve the minutes from last month.
Second?
A second.
All approve?
Aye.
Great. The minutes from last month's meeting are approved. Do we have anyone online for public comment at the moment?
Doesn't
Okay.
go that way.
Not that I'm aware.
Just because the system can be a little fun sometimes, is everyone okay if we do have someone where we pause and let them make their comment later in the meeting?
That's
Are we
okay.
good
with
with
me.
that?
No problem.
Okay, so let's go around with check-ins and updates since we last met. Could be sustainability, can be, you know, what you're showing up with to this meeting.
Guess I'll jump in. Wanted to thank the mayor and the council for letting me jump in on the board here and work on something that I care quite a bit about. On a personal level, my wife and I are excited to be taking delivery of our first e-bikes very soon here. We've been waiting 2 months for them, but they're just around the corner.
We'll be waiting for a report on how much fun you're having on those bikes. And if you ride more, if you find, I'm curious if you find yourself riding more.
I will let you know.
Okay, I'm going to say that we just took the electric car to Lewiston, Idaho last week, and it was a bust. The infrastructure is so terrible off of I-5 that 4 out of 5 charging stations were not working. So we plan to stop at you know, the right place to recharge, and the fast charger was not working at all, and the slow charger was working so poorly you had to plug it in again every 2 to 7 minutes. It was random. So we spent
Whoa.
3 hours doing that so that then we can make it to Hermiston, which had beautiful chargers. Yeah, so Hood River does, the Dalles does not. Just a bust.
Was
So-
it a type of charger that wasn't working, or was it random brands?
Well, I can't count Tesla. I don't have a Tesla, so don't know about them. So, you know, we need a certain plug. And for the, I don't know what they're called, 1772 or CCS, the ones that we could use were not working. It was really a bummer.
Because I'm curious about the network. I remember seeing something where there's some apps, you know, where your car's dialed into it, and it should give you feedback of what's working and not working. But I don't think all the chargers are on that network.
We have 4 different apps. We're checking all of the different apps to see which ones. And they, you know, the one we were there at 2 o'clock in the morning in Dayton, Washington. Didn't get to our motel till 3 o'clock in the morning because it took 15 hours to do a 7-hour drive. We kept having to stop and spend 3 hours on a slower charger. And what would happen is we'd finally call and they say, "Oh, gee, okay, thanks for telling us it's not working." Not in their system. The management of the system is not there. It was really aggravating. Yeah,
So these apps are relying on just crowdsourced data, or are they real-time data?
I don't know what they're using to, you know, there's definitely, a couple of the apps have comments from people saying, just use this, it's fine, or just use this, it's busted, you know. So there are definitely comments, but I've actually repressed the name of the first place that was so aggravating. It's
Thanks
just
for
east of
sharing
Dallas.
that.
Yeah, so it's really a problem, really is. And if West Linn ever puts the money into having a fast charger for people traveling through, which would be so great, we also need to put in the money for maintenance. It's like funding schools and not funding the maintenance for the school.
Well, I think like Mike said, it's a difference between if it's a crowdsource where somebody was the unfortunate person to arrive and find out it doesn't work and then report it, but it really should be tied in directly to the equipment where that equipment is automated so it feeds back if
Yeah,
it doesn't.
Yeah,
Presumably these chargers have some means of communication because you have to pay for the power. So they've got a connection out. They should leverage that to let users know.
yeah. So it was a painful trip. So we took 2 days to get back for a 7-hour drive. Yeah, it was really painful experience. I can tell you guys about this. I'm trying really hard not to tell my friends because I want them to get electric car. At this point, I'm going to say, get a plug-in hybrid.
But this is important feedback, because as we're asking the city to electrify, how are we being realistic about it and how do we support it?
Yeah.
Installing it's the beginning.
Yeah, but it should not be installed without organizing for maintenance, however that's going to be. Yeah. So that was my trip from hell, second worst vacation in 10 years.
Ooh.
We did enjoy just singing in the car, but I got the giggles late at night. Next.
I'll jump in. I got an email yesterday from Joanne Ciccione, who had really been the point person in organizing efforts to really look at the Oregon Marine Board's differential policy between the lower Willamette and the Newburgh Pool with regard to speedboat size. And apparently the Oregon Marine Board has not taken into consideration any of the efforts to try to regulate the size of those speedboats in the Newburgh Pool. Actually, the last 3 miles of that pool after the dam are not considered part of the Newburgh Pool, which was one of the things that we tried to get the legislation to address last spring. So all of that area between the dam and Willamette Park is not being regulated. And because of the fact that boats are now, larger boats are prohibited from doing towed water sports on the lower Willamette, many of them are now coming to Willamette Park and this section. And I've seen erosion over the last couple of years as a result of the kind of more extensive activity. So I've wondered whether the Sustainability Advisory Board and Westland itself might be interested in taking a position with regard to making a statement about our support of new legislation that would really make sure that folks are able to do towed water sports, but not with boats that weigh over 5,000 pounds. So I'll leave that as it is, but it's something that we might want to bring up.
Okay, I'll jump in briefly. I have just been accepted by the Westland Tidings to do a monthly sustainability column.
Great.
Great. Awesome.
Yes.
I didn't hear the last part, Terry. You said you were accepted to a what kind of column?
A monthly sustainability column.
Fantastic. I thought that's what you said. I just wanted to make sure I heard you right.
I heard you right.
Great. Didn't hear for which publication.
Westland Tidings.
Yes, good, good, good.
That's fantastic. There's no shortage of topics.
Yep, yeah, you're up, Kim.
Well, this a couple weeks ago, I attended a oh my gosh, I can't think of the name of it, but it was like a fleet event that was geared for operations and maintenance people. So I was kind of wishing our parks people were there, but they have a lot of tricked out lawnmowers and kind of look like transformer land, to get into low impact vehicles. And it was at Portland International Raceway, so it was nice to be able to drive the electric. I got to drive an electric truck. We won't talk about CDL license, but experiencing you know, how they ride, how they see the road, and then just cool things like golf carts, like tricked out golf carts that are really good at a city of this size, particularly when you're looking at bike paths. When we've talked about in transportation, you know, because it's a state requirement to have multimodal infrastructure, things like the bike path in Willamette, that's permeable pavement. But permeable pavement needs to be maintained to function. So if you're going to have your drainage work, you have to have that ability to clean it. So it's pretty interesting to see like these tiny sweepers that can be electric and smaller vehicles that are multi-purpose. So I did not circle back with parks yet, but I was involved with that. And then because we have Brenna here today, I had an interesting conversation with a friend who's a wetland scientist as we were discussing conflicting goals with, like, if I'm doing a backyard habitat restoration, if you get into native plantings where you're trying to attract certain species and down to insects, it can be completely flipped from fire landscaping. And as we experienced the wildfires last year, I think the Barrington Heights neighborhood got certified for fire safe landscaping, which is fantastic because we need to be able to survive the changing climate. But when it comes to the things we're recommending, there's a lot of interesting conflicting goals to get to different places. You know, so one's got underbrush and things for creatures, and the next says take out all the underbrush. So it'll be interesting to see how we take disaster preparedness and restoring nature at the same time.
Mhm. Is this a time to add on to that comment? Okay. Terry, when you sent the document to me, I was looking at that particular issue and thinking that perhaps the communities that are on the periphery or are near parks or greenways would want to have fire prevention, but other communities that are pretty safe for fire could go ahead and not focus on that, but focus instead on native habitat that's for birds and insects. Don't know. There's some overlap, but not much.
I suspect it's a much more complex conversation, you know, when you look at like, well, just wildlife habitat of being able to get in and out of neighborhoods and you know, all that stuff. But it's definitely an interesting topic to visit. And then Councilor Baumgartner, do you have anything to add? Because this is your world. You know.
About the plantings.
Anything. This is our, you know, sustainability. This is your jam.
Chicken time.
Was someone else saying something?
It's chicken time.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Terry.
Sorry.
That's all right. Well, I was really excited about our education presentation about weatherization and the programs that people can utilize if they qualify for middle to lower income. That is, I think, an area that is often forgotten in West Linn because of the perception of everyone is wealthy in West Linn, which is absolutely not true. And there are people on fixed incomes and all kinds of different demographics. But that was really interesting to me and exciting. And I've been excited to listen to all of you and what you've been discovering. I've been writing it all down. But I don't think I've made any discoveries personally since we last met. So that's about it for me.
Jerry, this is your moment before we finish check-ins. You know, you may have stumbled across something you're excited about to share this week before we get into it.
Should I share the leaders in sustainability news now, or is that?
Go for it.
Okay,
Let's
so
check
I have a few screens up. I apologize about that. Maybe Brenna can chime in with what she's up to while I find the email, or maybe not.
Can I jump in here? Agenda topic 11 is Leaders in Sustainability Report. So you want to move that up to now or do it later?
It's really up to the group. Whatever's more convenient.
I was giving you a hall pass, but I mean, if you're ready.
I'm ready. So the ACC, or the Adult Community Center, City Hall, and the library are on track for silver. Our operations building, which is where the Public Works Department is and Park and Rec is housed there as well, is just short of silver. The police station is just sort of gold. It should be pretty simple for us to reach those levels. Alex Mim from Clackamas County has asked us a few questions that Jeremiah, our facilities manager, and I need to follow up on. But we will do that. And Alex also paired us with an energy specialist from PGE to just help us identify some ways that we can be more efficient in our buildings, save some money, which we are going to follow up on. And I think that meeting's scheduled for next week. I just want to thank the SAB for identifying this as a goal. Going through the process was helpful for Jeremiah and I think that one of the things we want to do internally as a result of going through this, not just all the things that are identified, but just we want to start an internal newsletter that highlights some sustainable practices. We want to pair that with the DEI work that we're doing. We don't have an internal newsletter now. It's something I'd like to be sent probably every couple of weeks. But those are the two tips that we'd like to insert in those newsletters. I'm excited about that. That's my update.
Super exciting, Jerry. Very encouraging.
And we appreciate it from the city, the leadership, because if we're asking the community, business and private, this is really a great way to say this is how we're doing it at a leadership level in the city. And Brenna, you might want to, you're new, but if there's something that you want to share, to check in and or a little bit about yourself and what's interesting to you about this group.
Sure. Well, Jerry told me to come, so that's why I'm here. But actually, so my first job out of college was with a nonprofit that focused on local clean energy and decentralizing the energy supply down in California. So that is kind of where I got sort of into the more clean energy space. In college, I went to Chico State, and they were one of the first countries in the nation to have some type of green certification. I forget what it was, but so was, I think, just on sort of the cusp and the peak of really sort of getting into a more larger, more easily accessible sort of green, climate sustainable movement. And yeah, I'm really passionate about the green spaces and then the overlap as well in terms of emergency management. I think it's really interesting now how we look at climate and climate change, and we're just seeing, the impacts on so many various levels of urban growth, urban expansion, heat domes, and they're just sort of multiple compounding factors that really impact everyone's lives on a daily basis now. And to me, it's really interesting in terms of planning, because you don't really look at, those developments with an emergency management perspective. And I think now we're really sort of starting to challenge that what's been current best practice or thinking, so that we can be more sustainable in the way we build our buildings and the way we, navigate our lives and things like that. So I'm really excited to be here. My husband and I actually just bought a Nissan Leaf, I think about a month ago. So we are navigating the whole where we can charge situation. So I completely understand the vacation story. I've looked into that and I was like, ooh, yeah, we probably still need some type of access to fuel at some point. So, and then the last thing I'll share is today I was meeting with PGE to learn more about their completely 100% clean energy program, or yeah, or I guess program we could call it, that they're going to be rolling out to residential and small business customers coming up very soon. There's 5 cities within Oregon that are moving forward to pursue that as an option for their communities. And so John and I were just participating in the conversation to learn a little bit more about the program, really all that it entails, and should be interesting to present back to this group once we know more. And hopefully I will also be joining some conversations regarding the Clackamas County Climate Action Plan. So look forward to that as well.
Fantastic, and looking forward to hear what about the energy program. We did, I don't know if John filled you in, we did the SAB recommended to council, was it 2019, Terry? That we do the renewable, they had a new program for wind and solar, which actually saved us money. So we were part of that pilot program. So I don't know if you discussed that, but we're like, we should, if there's an opportunity, we should get invited to the dance for our city. That's fantastic. Wow, this is like the best meeting ever. Does everyone like thumbs up if everybody like, yes, we're making progress? Even if it's your first meeting or you're not first meeting, Greg. Okay, so moving on to sustainability education series update and ideas for 2022 sessions. And when we did this last year, we were able to knock out a really good, lineup of sessions. So Terry, do you want to do a recap on the sustainability education series?
Yeah, the first 2 have happened. We have 2 left, one on next one on composting in November, and the 4th in December. Alex Mem of the county, who used to be chair of this group, do one on basically reduce, reuse, recycling. So our current series of 4 ends with December. So we need to decide, number one, if we want to continue, and if we do, like I assume the answer is yes. We'd like to schedule, and the onus has fallen on different members to find presenters and speakers. So that would be the topic now. If we want to continue, and if so, what topics would we like to see covered? Silence to fill the bar room.
This isn't necessarily a topic to be covered, but I did notice that the education series events that I've been to have not been particularly well attended. I'm hoping that maybe we can get some assistance from the city to do a bit more to promote those in advance. I know that they've been highlighting them probably once on social media through the city's Facebook page and so forth. I think it'd be great if we can get more people to attend them, but I think that's going to come down to how widely they're promoted.
Yeah, that's why, well, I know the city has promoted them minimally, but they have done it, but that's why I've encouraged everybody to do posting on social media, at least that. As far as additional publication by the city, we can make.
Or maybe the library, because in the past we've had the library hosted, so maybe if the library can share it, where even though we're doing them online, if we could do it also like through the library, they've got a really wonderful built-in, people that, because who doesn't love the library?
Well, I know registration goes through the library, and I know with the Westland Alliance, in the past with presentations we've had there, the library actually did posters for the presentations, put it up in the library on their calendar. So I don't know if that's a possibility.
Have notifications been put into the Westland Tidings?
I had asked Alicia Schroyer about that, but I don't think anything was put in the tidings.
But it certainly seems like your column would be an opportunity to provide information about them as well.
Yeah. Mhm.
We can promote them more on our social channels. And I'll ask the library.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, well, the next one is what is it, November 9th? It's the second Tuesday of November. So it's coming up, sneaks up on us.
Can I ask a question about those? Is there a component to like appeal to kids or and include them in some type of activity, or is it really just adult education focused?
Yes.
Okay, the next presentation we have is, I think the name is Chris Marr. She's lovingly known as the Worm Lady. We're going to talk about composting. She's an expert on worm composting, worm bins. So it's entirely possible that we could try through various means to market that to kids. To get in touch with Chris and be sure that, you know, she has some focus in that respect.
Is there a way to do that through the schools? Because I am friends with two kids in my neighborhood, 9 and 11, 10 and 12, and they love my worm bin. These two little girls just are on my my worm bin. So I think that reaching kids that way might be a fun way to do it.
Great idea.
I think it'd be great if there's a way we can integrate this. I mean, I think the challenge is, to answer your question, Brenna, is that, you know, like you've got a speaker that's trying to get in, you know, 40 minutes of content and get off. And it can be very different between kids and adults, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be. And I've been thinking about this too. Like, I had signed up to volunteer. I volunteered with the snowboard team before COVID to help on the course. And while I was getting my background check, it's like, what else are you interested in? Because I've done, you know, field trips. And so I signed up for Crest. I was really excited to go work, you know, out in the gardens at Crest, and then COVID hit, so they weren't letting anybody out there. But it's really be great to have that school connection to the education series or have kids involved with it. But if there's a way we can pull that off in that hour, or tag team on it, or have the kids moment of it, or the kids version of it, that'd be fantastic.
Victoria, would you like to pursue that avenue as far as asking the schools or marketing the schools?
I can do that, but I won't be able to do it until about November 5th because I'm leaving tomorrow. I've been packing all day.
Oh, that's too late. That's
Yeah.
November 9th is the presentation. Anybody else?
And Brianna, I could chat with you about some of the teachers in the local district who have really focused on sustainability issues, and especially the creation of school gardens. So there are a number of people here who would be real resource people in terms of finding ways to link your programs up, like programs like this, up with schools.
Now, this is a virtual meeting or education session, right?
Yeah.
I think it'd be really hard to get younger kids involved or interested because they've been on computers all day. I mean, I think virtual school is really hard myself. Not that I have a child trying to do it right now, but just from what I've seen of kids. But I do have, and it's probably the same context Greg's talking about, but the teachers at Westland High School that I worked with, one of them specifically does permaculture, and they've created a garden at the high school, and maybe they could even have some kind of extra credit and offer that if the students attend the series, the talk, and do a report or something for extra credit, that would be a way to get some kids involved.
Or even get them on it. I mean, if you had, I'm sure most speakers can adapt, even if it's 5 minutes for a student that's been involved in the program, to be able to contribute to, you know, that hour, because then they're really going to be engaged and they're going to bring a much different perspective. I'm hearing a lot of possibility.
Yeah. I will
I assume
reach
at
out.
some point there's a desire to move these, if we continue the series, into in-person events, if at all possible. I'm
Yeah,
sure if there was the opportunity for kids to see a big bin of worms, that they'd show up for it.
Well, keep in mind that if we had not had the viral pandemic, these would have all been in person. Because the ones we did several years ago were all in person at the library. So we only did it out of, we had to. So, yes, answer.
This is an opportunity to expand our audience, you know, so that when we can meet in person and you can touch the worms again in person, that we've attracted people that might not have come in person before. So I think we've really got a great opportunity right now to, you know, find new ways to engage. But it's a great question, Brenna, because, you know, the kids are way more fun in a meeting anyway.
And my former job in Milwaukee, we had partnered with OMSI to do some on-hand science experiments at the library for some events too. So that might even be a good possibility for something down the line to be really engaging as like a kickoff, something of some sort.
I am so glad you're here. Okay, do we want to
So-
come up, since we've got a topic for November, and then, didn't we take December off last year? Or before in the past, Terry?
Yeah, for a meeting, yeah.
Yeah, so if we could come up, with topics that everyone's interested in before the next meeting?
And present to the next meeting? Present those
Yeah,
topics at the
now
next
or
meeting?
online, through email? I have an idea.
What's your proposal?
Well, I was just reading a long article in the New Yorker about sustainability of the food, which involves eating insects, which in our culture is an ick factor, but kids seem to respond to that with great interest. And there was a cook-off in San Francisco recently on the street, and the judges were the children who were eating various dishes. The one that I can remember exactly is there was a stink bug and kale salad, which the kids rejected because they didn't like the kale. So, and you can also make sushi with an actual tarantula, you know, the crab sushi that has got the bits of crab sticking out, but then you take the abdomen off and I just know. But the kids go for it. So that could be a possible topic for sustainability in the future.
So, that sounds fun. Kim, getting back to your suggestion, are you suggesting that we come up with ideas for future sessions and exchange them via email prior to the next meeting? Or-
Yeah, if we could email prior to the next meeting, of just like, here's my list of things I think would be interesting. And particularly if you have links to something, I mean, like Victoria said, you didn't just bring up the bug thing. If you have a link and here's the YouTube video, of the kids talking about that I hate kale, but I'll eat the stink bug. They're very compelling ways to broach a topic. And now we've got, you know, Mike's here, Greg's back, and we've got Brenna. So we've got, you know, some great perspectives of other programs that you've been involved with that have been successful. So just do a topic dump. If we've got 50 of them, you know, at least you can kind of see them and noodle on them before we get back together and say, what do we want? And get the calendar out next meeting and say, this is our series for the next year.
So that's the assignment for everyone, is to brainstorm some ideas. Here, we'll pick them next meeting, right?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Okay.
And so if we're good with that, Clean Cities, thank you very much, Jerry. Oh, no, you didn't do that one yet. Okay, Clean Cities, number 6.
We did have a conversation with I think his name's Mike, right, Kim?
Michael Graham.
Yeah, so we spoke to him. He did exactly what you said. He's like, oh, we have technical assistance available. They didn't have much other information than that, he was aware that we had won the PGE grant. I'm forgetting the name of the PGE grant. I just heard it today. But he was aware of that, and he's supportive, and there in the future when we apply for other grants that are available. He did mention that he's got a federal network and a network throughout the state, and available as a resource. So it was helpful.
Well, and for anyone here, I mean, you know, for anybody that's new, the Columbia Willamette Clean Cities Coalition they work with the U.S. Department of Energy. So if you've done any grant work, you know how it's really hard to chase that stuff on your own. So if anyone has interest on sustainable transportation, you can check out their website. You can sign up for their webcasts and be on their email list for things that are of interest to you, because that helps the conversation. If, you know, I mean, you can't keep up on everything, but at least, you know, the things that are within your purview of interest or professional work. Thank you, Jerry. Looking, Community Development Code proposal discussion, number 7. So, we are submitting a proposal to council of what we'd like to target for staff assistance, so we can focus on what community development codes to review, because that's the CDC's, you know, it's a pretty sacred document, and it's complex because changing one thing can indirectly change 3 other things or negate something without intending to. So Terry, you've got a copy of that proposal to council, and I think everybody got it, right?
No, it did not go to council. It's still a proposed, still draft.
No, it's a draft, but everybody on the SAB received it, yes?
On the SAB, yeah.
Okay, so this is the time to discuss, like, are you good with it? Do you want to add something? Do you want to change it? And Brenna probably didn't see it because you just were told to come to this meeting.
I've glanced over some of the items, yes.
Okay, great.
Trying to get up to speed.
I politely requested. I did not tell you.
He enthusiastically advised I would really like to participate.
Did you get any snacks out of the deal? You gotta hold out next time for the beef jerky before you say yes. Okay, so so on that topic then, is there any, I mean, how does this look? Is this comprehensive enough of the things that we want to look at and see? Is this a community development code or is it something else? And how are we most effective in this review?
I know Mike had sent around a lot of questions and comments on that document, some pretty detailed, which was very good, but I'm wondering, as far as the specifics related to types of levels of charging stations, percentages of different types of trees, how detailed for community development code do we need to get? Question. And also especially related to the EV charging stations, that's a technology that's constantly changing. I'm thinking we don't want to get really specific about numbers and stuff because that could change, because I think we want to make sure that if there's something does get into the code, that it is long lasting and won't be outdated in a year or two with new technological development. So just my 2 cents. I know we want to, from just a paper standpoint, we want to keep the proposal 1 page, yet we want it to be succinct enough so that everybody knows what's expected. But we don't want to get into the weeds too much to where in a couple of years it might be outdated. And I don't know, as far as the code goes, as far as like the tree preservation, how detailed we need to get. And maybe I'm wondering if we should get somebody like Darren Weiss or Chris Meyer from the planning department to get some input on this before you submit it. Question mark, what do you think? Jerry, anybody else?
With respect to the specificity of some of the recommendations for the EV charging, I think at least we can assume that there's not going to be a deviation from the current voltages that are typically run through residences. You know, you're going to be dealing with 120 volt or 240 volt circuits, and that's not likely to change. The limitations on the current charging technology are essentially that 120 volt charger, just because of the wires that are run internally through our residences, that's never going to charge an electric car quickly. And one of the things that I know that this recommendation is targeting is the ease of adoption of charging technology that makes the choice to make, that makes choosing to buy an electric car more appealing and less costly at the outset. That kind of charging technology is really only ever going to be possible with something that's 240 volt circuits. So we do need there to be something that makes the installation of a 240 volt circuit to a location that is accessible to where people will be storing their cars. That I think is a reasonable level of specificity.
Yeah, okay. I agree. So Mike, I was wondering if knowing our page limitations and what our goal is to encourage EV cars and charging stations at home, if you could add something specific to that short little paragraph that would ensure everybody knows what we're talking about, and that it would ensure that there's enough infrastructure built into new homes to take care of that.
Okay.
Really to write a little sentence or something?
Yeah.
Great.
Let me just check back in on this of what the process is of where we're going with it. So if I understood correctly, we are the council goal for us this year was to review the community development code. We all agreed that we need input from city staff planning so that we know what we're impacting and what things make sense to change. We were asked to give a proposal to council so they can approve that time. And we do need the details like Mike's talking about, but for this proposal to council, is this sufficient in the general aspect for city staff to go, yes, this is in the community development code, or it's someplace else, or it's a policy, or, or you can't, that yes, no, can you, can't you? So that's my question is, do we start off? Because we kind of have a broad, it's specific, but it's still broad enough because we don't know where those changes lie. Again, if it's in the CDC or if it's someplace else. And then depending on what we are able to get into for discussion, that may take us months. We may spend a whole meeting on the charging station once that's approved.
You're right, Kim, because we talked about this previously, that we're submitting a general proposal to raise some eyebrows, and then if the council says that this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, if council says, yeah, this is something that we should look into, then it goes to Jerry to determine if there's staff time to look into this. And then I'm sure if it's something that was viable for the city to do, they would come back to us, and then we could get into the weeds and specifics before any code is revised. Right? So this document doesn't necessarily need to be that specific, just general, right? Because there's a lot of work to be done after this.
Terry, that's exactly right. And I would say that if it's general, I mean, the staff is going to come back with questions about specificity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it might be easier to start it at this level and then get down into the weeds with the staff.
So
Is this
Jerry,
being seen as a starting point because I have, a bunch of ideas for each of the different categories that I think if we're interested in getting something to the city council soon, this is wonderful. And I'm really delighted to see the kind of energy and thought that went into it. But I do see it as a starting point. And I would hope that we'd be able to come back to it in subsequent meetings to really kind of flush out some of the kinds of things that have been discussed so far.
Yeah, that's what we talked about, and we knew if this was accepted, then it will come back to us for the real work before it ever got into the code. So Jerry, back to you. I was wondering, based on what we just talked about, if as is, this proposal is ready or somewhat ready to go.
I might just chat about it with Darren and Chris a little bit, and I can get back to the SAB as a whole.
Okay. Tim, we're looking to get this to the council in November, right?
I guess my question is how do we get this done before the end of the year? Because this is our council goals. It's October. And our council goal is to review the CDC. We do not have the ability to do that as a group without guidance from staff. And this proposal is to go to council. The goal of this proposal was to send it to council after this meeting. So at their next meeting, they could go, yes. Jerry can go have staff, work on this and advise us so that when we meet again in November, that we've had staff look at it. Or are you saying, Jerry, that you need staff to look on it now before we send the proposal to council?
If it's submitted now to council, it's still going to be reviewed by staff. Either way, it ends up being reviewed by staff.
Yeah, we knew that. So that's why we wanted to, like Kim said, we wanted to get this to council very soon after this meeting.
Well, I
To
mean,
me, that's good. To me, the document reads like it's a set of the types of changes and the goals behind those changes to the code, not necessarily what the changes themselves should be. It's more of a guiding document. And in that capacity, then I think it's okay, more or less as it is. You're right about it not needing that level of specificity at this point.
That was really the bigger question. I mean, like Jerry, you're the boss. You can ask them to look at this and say, okay, where do we go with it? But if it needs more than a couple of hours, then we do need that council approval for them to advise us well. Correct? Or
I can ask the staff to review it as well. I mean, not everything that the staff reviews is reviewed by council. I'm confused by the question because it feels like we're talking a lot about process here and
well, it's budgeting. Staff time is budget too. So it's like,
Right.
so as long as we're good with it, I thought the intent of sending this to council is that if you needed to approve staff time for this, and if we don't, let's do it.
I think what's here is worthy of submission to council, and it'll be reviewed by the council and then subsequently reviewed by the staff. I mean, I think what Mike just said is exactly right, that this is a good starting point for more work.
Okay, that being the case, what if all of you take one last look at it and see if there's any, grammar, verbiage, or something that should be changed? And if we do or don't hear from anybody by tomorrow afternoon, it's going to council. Is that too heavy-handed?
Because the sooner we send this, the more fresh it is for Mary, having just been at this meeting.
Yeah.
I don't see this listed on here, but I did mention it in the email that I had sent out. I was wondering if we might include some language about discouraging the use of concrete where possible in place of something more like cross-laminated timber. Concrete is a very, very carbon-intensive material, and cross-laminated timber is, in many circumstances, quite an acceptable substitute for that. So whatever future building takes place, if it doesn't need to have concrete in certain circumstances, then probably be best if it didn't wherever possible. I did a quick back of the envelope calculation. If I wanted to put a sidewalk along the 50 feet in front of my house, it would release as much carbon emissions as driving my car over 2,000 miles. So, yeah, concrete is quite expensive in terms of its emissions.
Just a question. What does that mean in terms of sidewalks?
In terms of like what an alternative material might be, or
For sidewalks.
honestly can't say I know too much about what the alternatives might be. Pavers perhaps may be better,
Uh-huh.
but I haven't searched that far into what the alternative options would be.
Yeah, thanks.
Pavers are still concrete, so.
Hey, remember the old boardwalks
Mm-hmm.
with cross-laminated timber?
Right.
I did have a question about that, Mike, because you really did a lot of research in that. Did you find anything where, because when you and I had spoke, it sounded like it was on the processing end where they make it at the plant, not so much, I mean, it was in that process. Are there producers that are environmentally responsible with with their process at the plant? Because that could be a purchasing issue of that we're requiring contractors that follow X process or are certified, in a certain way to do work in the community. That might be an approach, but did you find that when you were?
My understanding is that the reason that the carbon emissions associated with concrete are so high is because of the manufacturing process itself. The ability to produce Portland cement requires the use of a large rotating kiln, which is fired typically with a product called coke, which is a concentrated carbon, essentially, that's capable of producing really high temperatures that are needed for the chemical decomposition of a certain precursor to that cement. I know that there are startups that are working on the question of how do we produce cement in a more climate-friendly way, but my understanding is that at the moment, those startups are not able to provide concrete in a way that is cost competitive. So I can certainly look into it more. I'd be happy to do that. But I don't know if it's just a matter of, calling around and finding a different concrete yard that has this other product available. I think it is more intrinsic to the way that the vast majority of concrete is produced in the first place.
So I guess my question is, if we were to include that topic on this improvements proposal, it would have to really be a fourth recommendation. It doesn't fit with any of the others.
That's correct.
And that, it might still fit on one page, but I don't know if that makes too many recommendations. That's just, if we don't have time to actually work that in, and we're not.
Okay, in my opinion, this community development code improvement is not a one-shot deal. I think this could carry over to the next year and the next and the next, because there's a lot in there. And everything we're working for, a lot of it's included in the code. So, no reason, if it doesn't make it into this one, we are not restrained from making proposals. Be another proposal after this early next year. I hear you, Michael. I think it's a really good topic. Based on what we just said about getting this in right away, I'm not sure. It's going to hold things up a little because somebody's got to write it, we got to put it in, we got to approve it.
Yeah, and I'd much rather have a suitable draft of something handed off to council so that that process can get started. And like you said, this is not a one-shot deal, and next time around we can get something rolling with respect to this if it's not possible to get it in this round.
I see this is priming the pump based on a goal that the council gave to us. And if they see we're serious about it, then subsequent proposals could be taken also seriously.
I can't speak for the other council members, but I can say that I'm very excited about just this general direction. And I can't imagine that other council members won't also be excited about starting to do more diligence about looking at development through an environmentally sustainable lens. And I think that's a really timely and important thing to be doing. I can't imagine someone saying, nope, we don't want to do that. So I appreciate all of everyone's contributions. I think they're all really valuable. But I think it looks good to go forward. And like you guys were saying, you know, if there's fine tuning to do, that can still be done.
I think the one argument for including Mike's point is that he is looking at the question of building materials, something that really isn't explored in the other three. And I think if people feel comfortable adding building materials in the future, then let's go ahead with what we've got. But if not, it might make sense to make sure that there is a category related to building materials included in this proposal, but be brief. And not necessarily, use the concrete as an example of what could be done rather than making it the specific proposal, which could, be potentially controversial.
I think that's perfect. I'm sorry, go ahead, Brennan.
Oh, I was just
Especially
gonna
on
say,
emergency management, because it needs to work environmental and not catch on fire, right?
yeah, that would be great. There's also, just alternative forms of asphalt as well that are better suitable for filtering water that then goes into the stormwater system that then flows into, your natural areas and things like that. So just, I think looking at building materials as a whole overall could be a great starting point to
Right.
evaluate some of those options.
Okay, in the interest of moving this along, I really see this, now that we're talking about it, I see a separate proposal in the near future just on sustainable building materials within the codes.
I'd be happy with that.
What do you think? And so I would suggest that we submit this proposal as is and seriously look at the next proposal to deal with the sustainable building materials.
I'm in favor.
I agree with separating it because for two reasons. And like we talked about is maintenance. That's one thing that really needs to be part of every conversation when you're making a change, just like Victoria was talking about. Don't just install a charging station. How do you maintain it? How is it functional? And the same with, what you're talking about pavement that drains, the pervious pavement. You have to maintain it. You got to vacuum it. If it gets full of sand, it doesn't drain anymore. So I love the idea of this being a separate topic later because it is a big topic and it has a lot of impact because there's development is happening, especially with House Bill 2001. And if anybody's taken the survey yet, that's what they're talking about right now is middle housing and infill and development. So how do we do that intelligently? And it's its own topic.
I like it. Okay. So are we agreed that if you have any comments on the existing document, get it to me, excuse me, tomorrow, and I will spirit this on to Jerry, who will spirit it toot sweet to the council, right?
That's good.
Toot sweet being immediately?
Yes.
To the council?
I'm just having trouble hearing you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anybody else having trouble hearing me?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Sorry. Okay, moving on.
Wonderful. Okay, so you're going to be sending that off. And if anyone wakes up in the morning with a light bulb moment, please get that to Terry right away on this proposal so we can get that to council. Number 8, Sustainability Advisory Board website review revisions. And Mike sent some stuff that was really some great feedback on the
Yeah.
website.
Excellent.
Yeah,
So-
went through every page I could find on there. I guess the thing that I would suggest that, we start with is just to make sure that any outdated content is removed from the website. I think there's some things on there dating back to meetings for 2012.
Right.
So a lot of that's in the detail of the email that I sent out. But another thing that I was wondering about is I understand that at some point in the near past, or the recent past, the board did adopt an update to the Westland Sustainability Strategic Plan. And I noticed that that's not terribly easy to find on the website. It's easier to Google for that and then follow that link than it is to just have it pop up in front of you if you're not necessarily looking for it on the sustainability page. I think we should highlight that if it is to, be serving as kind of a guiding document for this board and anything the city does that pertains to sustainability.
Well, I have an opinion on that because, excuse me, a couple of years ago, the city had its website totally revised by a company. And a lot of us were involved in testing it, but the result was not so good because if you put in something to search for, like specifically sustainability plan or the code, you'll get every document and everything that has that verbiage in it. So what they did was they imposed a very shallow search routine in their update, and it does not ever give you exactly what you want. So I think the update to the city website was extremely poor, and it's really almost non-functional on a lot of levels. So I'm very distressed about that, and I agree. Like, you can Google something and get a lot quicker. Using the website is almost an exercise in futility. It really is. It's very frustrating. Totally agree with you, Mike, about there's so much outdated stuff that pops up. You go to meetings or SAB, for example, you just get old stuff. There's nothing new that comes up.
So I've got a question with regard to the website and just thinking about the changes that Mike had suggested. Who's responsible for actually kind of overseeing the website and making those kinds of explicit changes? I know in other organizations that I'm involved with, there are people who are really dealing with the website on a weekly basis. But it seems like that's kind of an extraordinary thing to expect from staff, but also from volunteer members. So I'm just curious about how to actually maintain the website and who will introduce the changes that Mike has, completely reasonably suggested.
I can answer this. So I brought these concerns to our communication staff previously. It's not just this group that has had comments about the search function on the website. That's an area that we need to improve. More broadly, I'm going to speak about this larger than just the website, but in communications in general. We will be refilling the position that Alicia Schroyer had. We should be filling a public works communication position. We will be hiring a business support specialist. Brenna is joined us. All of these jobs entail some form of communications. And my hope is that in a few months, we will have better communications overall and then functionality with our website.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I saw an email that said Brenna had permission to make updates. So if nothing else, there's another staffer that's available to just plug some things in.
Yes.
Okay.
I was recently sort of anointed the opportunity to update the Sustainability Advisory Board's webpage. So I will begin making some of those changes and figuring out the website structure so we can make it more user-friendly upon, first glance and things like that.
Great.
Okay, so two things. Jerry, did I hear you correctly in that Alicia is no longer here, no longer doing this job?
That's right. We'll be posting for that position soon.
Okay, so well, a lot of things that Mike brought up, and I looked at a lot of stuff too, it's just to kind of hang on old garbage and stuff. So if if one of us say, or more of us, Mike could just send that information, the basic cleanup things to be done, send it to Brenna. That,
Mhm.
that's doable?
That'd be fine.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, great, great.
I believe I already have that email. I think I was forwarded it from Jerry, so
Okay.
Okay,
I'll send out an update as soon as I start working on some of those items.
great. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email.
That's good.
I have a curiosity question about website maintenance because it's been an ongoing thing and, I mean, I'm hearing that you've got the staff to update it, but it seems like it's also, I think across a lot of cities, it's a battle to keep up with. Is there an opportunity for youth, like an internship with high school or college students to, to make sure, just to help with maintenance on a day-to-day basis? It's one thing to have Brenna, jump in and say, hey, this is time sensitive and I'm updating this, but if you're dealing with an actual emergency, be nice to have that redundancy of somebody that's able to get in and support you, and especially the younger generation is this is their life, is being, on a phone and making sure that it works on a website and a phone. So is there an opportunity there at a city level to have internship to help support the maintenance of this? Because you're new right now, Brennan. You don't know what's coming down your way.
We've had conversations with PSU about internships. That was more for the city management sort of role, but we haven't budgeted for internships. It would be something that we could budget for. I don't know if an intern would, if there's volunteer internships, if that's something that we would pursue. But the point isn't lost on me. I should have said unpaid internships. Sorry.
Mike, hurry up and get everything to Brenda before she gets her next emergency, okay?
I put down everything I could think of on there.
Okay.
I did want to ask the question too. I noticed that there have often been email addresses listed for, hey, to get in touch with the sustainability board, contact this specific person. And I was wondering if the city would, like, not maybe just for our board, but for every board, have a persistent email address that can be maintained and forwarded to whoever the board members are at that time, so that that kind of information doesn't go stale as board members change over.
I can kind of sort of speak to this with the web structure. So it's essentially these groups are part of a broader framework page that they live somewhere else. They're kind of sub pages. So that contact that's associated with that is associated with that higher tier frame structure. I can talk with our communications person to see if there's an ability to change some of them or hide some of them. But that's essentially why that appears that way, is just because of how that web page is housed within the broader structure.
Okay. I've also seen like older PDFs that would, like, say, for example, list the email address of who I'm assuming is the former chair of the board. And, if somebody was going to review that document, it doesn't necessarily say how old it is, but it says to get in touch with the board, please contact this person who's no longer on the board. And so if we had, like, Sustainability Advisory Board at westlinn.gov, then that could, serve as a persistent point of contact that can then just, go to whoever the current chair is.
And I will ask those questions.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, that's great. Anyone else want to add anything on to the website before we move on to the baseline energy audits?
I had one more question on that. Since the city is a public institution, I see that in some circumstances there are parts of the sustainability website that link to businesses within Portland. There's like an e-bike shop, for example. Is there any, like, I guess, concern over the city as a public institution promoting a private business on its website?
Yes,
I'm-
I don't know how
Yeah.
those links got there. I mean, I'm not aware of this.
Yeah, I remember like when we were talking about the website a couple of years ago, we had really decided not to include private businesses.
Well, let me chime in here because recently last year when we did this revision of the website, all the proposals, several of us worked on getting in specific areas in that, and we all submitted these, and this was all submitted to the entire group.
Mhm.
It was all approved. So if that goes against the grain, then it needs to be changed, but we weren't told that part. The entire board was sent that proposal for the whole layout and all the links and everything. No pushback. So if there is pushback, if it's incorrect, then we need to correct it.
I personally kind of am in favor of including organizations and businesses like Bosque Dell, for example. But I remember that in our conversations, we decided that was probably not the best thing to do. But I think if there's agreement, I think people will find it useful to know what businesses to actually go to pursue particular recommendations from the Sustainability Advisory Board. But it's
So maybe-
chancy.
Maybe we can get some clarification on that, because everyone has a point. I mean, Greg's right. It's nice to know this is where we can get native plants and this is where you can get an e-bike. Mike's correct, because they're private businesses. And maybe the in-between is putting up a nonprofit, like I'm just in my transportation mind, Fourth Electric, because they're not promoting a particular brand, but they would be dealing with electric bikes and electric vehicles, that kind of thing. So if we get clarification of, can we do private sector, and if we cannot, and then can we do nonprofits for a substitution? Because you're right, Greg, it's nice, we can talk about native plants, but then if you don't know where to go, it's a circular conversation. But at the same time, Mike's correct, it's a government entity, and unless it's the only person doing that.
My cynical side would say we don't have to worry about it because nobody looks at that website anyway. So.
Yeah, it may also be in the wording of how we reference, explore these local businesses or businesses like this or something like that too, so that we're not necessarily having a direct reference to promote a direct business. We may also need a list or so. So all good questions.
Yeah, because I think the links that I'm thinking of, they're very plainly stated. Like one just says Portland e-bikes. It's not like, hey, go patronize this business. It's just like, this exists.
Mhm.
So I'm not a lawyer of any sorts. I don't know where the line is.
Okay, we've got.
Victoria, you want to add something?
I do. I am the contact person for the community garden. And I'm loath to have my personal information on the city website. But people want to know how to join the garden. So I don't know, maybe this question is for you, Brenna, but is there a way to create a website or a connection or a link or something for the community garden that's can be passed on to when I quit doing this job, somebody else will do it, but when people are looking to join the garden, they've expressed frustration that it took them a long time searching around through the city to find out who to contact. I don't know if this is a place to do it or if there is somewhere else in the city communications that would work for that.
Yeah, I'll have to ask, because sometimes those are sort of nestled into the Parks Department. It just might be where it lands, but I'll ask if it would make sense to put it here or both places.
or both, but yeah, it is sustainable, but it's also through the Parks and Rec, so that makes more sense. But people do wonder how to find me. We don't have a great need to have more people on the waiting list. We're doing, have a lot of people always, so that's not a problem. Thank you.
Thanks. Here, I thought it was super secret. I thought you didn't know the secret handshake to get into the community garden. You've been in hiding. Okay, so number 9, baseline audits for energy, water, chemical use. So if Jerry, you can give us an update on that, and then Greg worked on this before.
What was the update that you were seeking on this one?
We've been talking about getting a baseline audit for energy, water, and chemical use. Like, you know, for some of our goals, it's you can't measure that you reduced things by a certain percent if you don't know what you started with. So just if you can give us an update on where that is, or if it hasn't moved. And then if it hasn't, then Greg can fill us in where he left it last, because I think you were the last person to do anything with it if it hasn't moved at City Hall.
I'm sorry, I don't have an update on this, but I'm happy to bring. Is there a list of data that you're seeking specifically? Okay.
We need, well, we had talked about this with, so what, we need to know what our electric use is for all of our buildings, our gas use, our water. Because when we're, you know, I mean, part of this relates to that sustainability at work, but if you look at our goals, our climate action goals, you can't measure what you can't track. So
We talked about which year, I can't remember, 19?
pick one.
There
Well,
should be multiple years
Yeah.
for establishing a
3 years.
baseline.
Yeah, several before, we need something before COVID too, because COVID is not reflective of non-COVID years.
We had definitely talked about this being a project for OIT or PSU students. If they were just shown where the data is, they could compile this. That happened before with the energy study that OIT students did on the city park several years ago. They did a phenomenal job, and the onus wasn't on city staff to do it. This would be a great project for students, but obviously someone is going to have to direct the students. But yeah, we're going to have audits for at least 3 years in a row for all of these things before we can really do anything meaningful, like Kim said.
okay.
Just to jump in, I'd be happy to do what I can to analyze any of that data that comes my way. Be interested in it, actually.
And
That
Greg,
can be
can
made available.
that's awesome. Greg, can you share where we were at the last time because you picked up that bag and you said it was pretty close to being finished. There was a gap, but I mean, what was the status of it when you last were
It
involved?
was not close to being finished.
Oh,
I think what I basically saw is that there had been stabs at trying to gather that data, like the example that Terry just mentioned, but that it was very difficult to find ways to actually begin collecting it. I remember basically it kind of stopping with city staff and not really being pursued because there was nobody who really had a handle on it at the time. So yeah, my efforts were not very successful at all.
Mike, is that something that you'd have time to help us with?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, at the outset, I don't know how much data you're going to be giving me.
Neither do I either, but I'm not shy about asking when people volunteer. So I will connect with PGE next week because they're supposed to meet with our building facilitator or facilities manager, like I mentioned earlier. So I think there's an opportunity here. So I will follow up with you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm an engineer by profession, so I live in spreadsheets and
Perfect.
derive more joy from them than I ought to. So yeah, shoot them my way, please.
fantastic. Okay, well, good. That so we know where it is. It needs to get picked up, and I'm hearing that we need access, and we've got an engineer on deck that can process the data. Fantastic news. Okay, number 10, 2021 annual report. I don't even know if we need to do a deep dive in it. This is an example. This is a report that, a copy of what we did last year. And this is what we need to submit to the city by the end of the year to say, here's what we did. Here's what worked great. Here's what were the challenges. So if you can, I mean, unless you want to discuss it, I mean, we can discuss it right now, but this is what we need to be filling out in November and December, or at least by December, because we need to get it to, the city by the end of the year.
Yeah, and pretty much the 2020 accomplishments are complete. But the 2021 challenges, need to plug a few of those in, and obviously the goals for 2022, 2022 challenges and goals need to be filled in. So I think this is something we could think about and probably flesh this out at the next meeting. And then in December, it can be sent on its merry way. Maybe you all could just be cogitating the challenges and the goals for next time. If you think of something, submit it, and we'll flesh those out next time. Does that sound like a plan?
Mhm.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So be it.
And part of that is we've also made recommendations to council for the following year. So we give them the report, and the recommendations are part of that. And I think this plays in real nicely with what we're working on right now anyway. So, but we're going to be the model advisory board by the end of the year, having this in.
Hey, Kim,
Yes,
has someone joined the meeting who maybe wants to speak?
I see Rachel. And I don't know how this works, if it puts people's names on here, whether they're speaking or not.
No, the names are down as attendees, so it'll show everybody whether they're wanting to speak or not, I think. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I just noticed that.
That's my wife. She just wanted to join to support me and
Oh, awesome.
see the meeting.
Hey, Rachel.
Rachel, you missed this awesome moment. You're gonna have to go back and watch the recording.
I did a song and dance.
Okay, so that's the overview of the young report that we're gonna slide right into with ease in the next month and a half. And then leader in sustainability program update number 11. Jerry did that already.
They did that.
Check us out. So it's 7:28. Were they go to the orders, or anything anyone else would like to add before our next meeting?
I just wanted to say I'm glad to see Brenna joining us. I imagine that there's a lot of overlap between thinking about sustainability and thinking about emergency planning. You know, in some sense, we're thinking about how to be prepared for things that might come up in the future that could be of risk to us. So I certainly wouldn't mind the board thinking more about emergency planning as well. I know that the city doesn't have a advisory board for that, but perhaps this is an avenue to at least speak about some of that.
Mike speaks my mind, as Quakers say, and I'm delighted to have Brianna joining us too. And I also just want to thank Mike for the reference to the Sustainable Development Code. When I was coming up with ideas for our CDC recommendations, the things that I thought about, I would go and look and see whether they were in that code, in that book, and they were. So it was really, really very helpful. So I recommend it to other folks if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, just to see what the broad categories are.
Yeah, it looks like a great resource.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we've got a proposal going to council. So hopefully, Mary, you'll give us, or we'll hear the good news by next time. Or actually, we won't even need the good news. Jerry will have staff time to get us all this great information back, so we can cook with gas.
Sorry, I did want to say one thing to address Terry. I neglected to respond to his email earlier in the week, but I thought he had asked when council will be reviewing their goals for 2022, and I don't know, unfortunately. But Jerry, do you know if there's a schedule for that?
So we had put it on a tentative agenda not that long ago, and frankly, I haven't had time to go through and really do a deep dive. I did do it today, just sort of looked over it, and I'm happy to say that we crossed off a lot of items that are on a list. So it'll be before the end of the year for sure. Hopefully November's agendas are a little lighter.
Yes, hopefully.
Thank
Okay.
you for that update. So I love the new energy of this group. And I'm excited for our November meeting where we're really going to knock through some things and have great information to hand to council during their goal setting.
Excellent. Well,
Thank you all.
welcome aboard to Michael and Greg.